WorldCanvass from International Programs. I'm your host, Joan Kerr, inviting you to stay with us for our program focusing on the Latino Midwest. We're coming to you from the University Capitol Center in downtown Iowa City, room 2780, and this program is being recorded for statewide television and radio distribution over UITV, Iowa Public Radio, and KRUI-FM. It will also be available along with all programs in this series as a free podcast on iTunes. I'd like to thank our production partners, UITV, the Pentacrest Museums, KRUI 89.7, and Information Technology Services. Today we'll look at the long history of Latino presence in the Midwest, the changing demographics of our region, and some of the ways in which Latino culture is shared with and enjoyed by non-Latinos in our region and around the world. We have an exceptional group of guests here to flesh out this very broad and interesting topic. We'll be discussing the history, education, literature, art, politics, and food of Latinos in the Midwest. And we're going to begin the program in a most wonderful way with music. Guitarist and singer Eugenio Solís, formerly of Solís and Solís, also a member of the mariachi band De Colores, is here to perform for us. Eugenio Solís was born in Sombrerete in the state of Zacatecas, Mexico. He's a self-taught musician, but he grew up hearing his grandfather play violin for local dances. He's been playing with a variety of bands since the age of 17, performing rock and roll and country music, Mexican folk songs, and virtually any kind of music in restaurants and clubs in Juarez. Also in El Paso and other cities before moving to West Liberty here in Iowa in 1991. And he's been playing regularly in West Liberty since 1994. So please welcome Eugenio Solís.
Thank you so much.
So it's so lovely to have you here. We're very much looking forward to hearing your music. So we heard a little bit about where you're from and the fact that you've lived here now in Iowa for quite a long time. But when you were growing up and living in Juarez, you made your living as a guitarist playing music.
Yes, most of all, not guitarist, just band player.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and
that's why you mentioned rock and roll bands.
Yeah. Oh, really? Oh. So was it electric guitar or
electric
other kinds
guitar,
of? Oh,
yes.
Really? Wow.
I play electric guitar, bass guitar too.
Yeah, really. Oh, and you didn't bring either of those with you tonight? No.
No. For a while, about a year, maybe a year and something, I've been playing drums too. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, and so now that you're here in Iowa, do you play quite often?
Well, not too often, but once in a while.
Yeah. And what kinds of songs are you going to play for us today?
There is a song from Spain, and aguapango, and kind of bolero.
Yeah. So how did you pick up the guitar? Who taught you?
Tell me again.
Who taught you how to play guitar? How did you learn this instrument?
I learned by myself.
Really?
I started picking up chords and notes by myself, by ear mostly. So with the run of the time, I start looking for learn some right music. I didn't learn, but I know a little bit.
Yeah. And these songs that you're going to play today, are they special for you? Do you especially love them?
Not really. It's something that I have in my repertoire, so there's nothing special. You know what? I don't have any kind of song that can be special for me. I just play songs, sing songs, and that's it.
Oh, that's a lot. So I know that at least the first songs you're going to play and sing, you'll be doing in Spanish, right?
It is in Spanish, yes.
Good.
I used to sing in English before, but I never knew what I was saying.
Right. Well, now some of us who don't speak Spanish will be in that situation now when we hear you sing, but I know that we'll enjoy them just the same. Would you like to introduce the first song in some way?
Oh yeah, this is a song from Spain. The composer is Camilo Sesto, or Camilo Blaines. And the name of the song is ¿Qué más te da? Recuerda que aunque te vayas no eres libre, nos ata nuestro pasado y algún papel. No me olvidarás tan fácilmente, antes de irte, piénsalo bien. Me tienes en un nudo el corazón, no sé si tengo yo la culpa o la razón. Lo que sé es que te quiero, ¿qué más puedo ofrecerte para retenerte? ¿Qué más te da? Regálame tu amor una vez más. ¿Qué más te da? Regálame una noche que no olvide jamás. ¿Qué más te da? Regálame un beso al despertar. ¿Qué más te da? ¿Qué más te da? ¿Qué más te da? En el amor siempre hay aciertos y hay errores. En la pareja siempre hay uno que se queja. Y en vez de salvar problemas nos empeñamos en hacernos daño y tratarnos como extraños. Estoy perdiendo la cabeza pensando en que me equivoqué, cómo y cuándo. Y cada 3 palabras digo tu nombre, y es que te amo tanto, no imaginas cuánto. ¿Qué más te da? Regálame tu amor una vez más. ¿Qué más te da? Regálame una noche que no olvide jamás. ¿Qué más te da? Regálame un beso al despertar. ¿Qué más te da? ¿Qué más te da? ¿Qué más te da? ¿Qué más te da? Regálame tu amor una vez más. ¿Qué más te da? Regálame una noche que no olvide jamás. ¿Qué más te da? Regálame un beso al despertar. ¿Qué más te da? ¿Qué más te da? ¿Qué más te da? Muchas gracias. Gracias.
So I guess every culture has love songs and broken-hearted songs and so on.
Yes.
And yeah. What's your favorite sort of song to sing?
Any kind.
Any kind.
Like I told you before, I don't have any.
Yeah. And I remember in the introduction we gave of you, your grandfather played violin. Were you surrounded by a lot of music when you were growing up?
Well, not really. My grandfather used to play violin for dancers, that dancer that we call matachines. Mm-hmm. There is a religious dance. So they used to dance in the church for example, the Virgin of Guadalupe Day.
Yes, right.
And something like that. But that was the kind. So it wasn't really music. It's just. They call sones for the dancers.
Sure, right. Great. So what's the next piece you're going to play?
The next piece is a kind of bolero. The name is Irresistible, and it talks about this man see an angel and the person that he is trying to be in love with. Yeah. So something like that.
Okay, great. So for anyone who's just joined us, you're listening to Eugenio Solís.
Desde el cielo he recibido la noticia de que un ángel se ha escapado sin querer y que anda perdido por la tierra. Lo que tiene es que se viste de mujer. Yo conozco una criatura que yo he visto y que cada vez que yo la puedo ver, me parece que estoy mirando a un ángel, el ángel de mi querer. Pero yo no soy más que un infeliz, que no puedo más que decirte así. Dios te guarde, criatura irresistible. Dios te bendiga, mujer. El consuelo que me queda es que he podido ver de cerca la más hermosa mujer, la criatura más linda que yo he visto, la figura más henchida de placer. Es tan rara, tan sencilla y tan hermosa como la más linda rosa de un vergel, que me muera si al verla yo no tiemblo. Ay, qué preciosa mujer, pero yo no soy más que un infeliz, que no puedo más que decirte así. Dios te guarde, criatura irresistible. Dios te bendiga, mujer. Dios te guarde, criatura irresistible. Dios te bendiga, mujer. Muchas gracias. Gracias.
So you told me before we started the program that you had lived for most of your life. You'd grown up in Ciudad Juarez and...
Yes, the whole life until I was 44, 46 that I got here.
Yeah. Why did you come to Iowa?
Why did I come to Iowa? Good question, huh? Well, there exists a problem in Mexico with musicians. When they get to the age of 40, it's almost impossible to get somebody to play with. Or most of all, the bands doesn't like to have old people. So mostly I start thinking, well, I'm going to need a job. And around, I've been placing appointments, yes, in all El Paso,
yes,
all the halls, the wide city.
Yeah.
And they never call me when I start having troubles to work in the music. So then a friend of mine invited me to Iowa. I said, why not?
Yeah.
If I cannot find anything right here, so maybe. And yes, thanks God I got here and I started working right away. So.
Yeah, wonderful. And you've been here now for almost 20 years.
Yes, I think already 20
right around
years.
20,
yes.
Yeah. Have you been happy in your time in Iowa? Is it a good place for you to have lived?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to say yes. You can say no. but yeah. Well, I know you have another song for us. What's this next one?
The next one is, like you say, about is a prisoner. I think the name of the song is The Prisoner Number 9 in English, El Preso Número 9 en español. So, El Preso Número 9, he's in prison because he killed a friend of him that he found with his, I don't know, wife, maybe just girlfriend, I don't know, something like that. But he killed both. So
Okay.
so he went to prison for that.
Okay.
El preso número 9 ya lo van a confesar. Está rezando en la celda con el cura del penal, porque antes de amanecer la vida le han de quitar, porque mató a su mujer y a un amigo desleal. Dice así al confesor: los maté, sí señor, y si vuelvo a nacer, yo los vuelvo a matar. Padre, no me arrepiento, ni me da miedo la eternidad. Yo sé que allí en el cielo el Ser Supremo me ha de juzgar. Voy a seguir sus pasos, voy a buscarlos al más allá. El preso número 9 era un hombre muy cabal. Iba la noche del duelo muy contento a su jacal, pero al mirar a su amor en brazos de su rival, sintió en su pecho el rencor y no se pudo aguantar. Al sonar el clarín, se formó el pelotón y rumbo al paredón se oyó al preso decir: Padre, no me arrepiento, ni me da miedo la eternidad. Yo sé que allí en el cielo el Ser Supremo me ha de juzgar. Voy a seguir sus pasos, voy a buscarlos al más allá. Gracias. Gracias.
You have a great voice, and you play guitar wonderfully. It's just a treat to hear you. I know we're coming to the end of this segment, but would you like to sing one more song? You said you had one in English that you might sing as well?
I'm not a good singer. I mean, I don't sing very well in English. Most of all, my accent and pronunciation, I think, maybe...
You think you'd rather not?
I can try.
Okay, please do.
This is a song that was recorded by what's the name of those people? Well, Bee Gees were not. There's a light, a certain kind of light that never shone on me. I want my life to live with you, live with you. There's a way, everybody say, to do each and every little thing But what does it bring if I ain't got you? I ain't got, baby, you don't know what it's like. Baby, you don't know what it's like to love somebody, to love somebody the way I love you. In my parade, I see your face again. I know my frame of mind. You ain't got to be so blind, and I'm blind, so very blind. I'm a man. Can you see what I am? I'll even bread for you. But what good does it do if I ain't got you? Ain't got, baby, you don't know what it's like. Baby, you don't know what it's like to love somebody, to love somebody the way I love you. Yeah, you don't know what it's like, baby. You don't know what it's like to love somebody, to love somebody the way I love you. Gracias. Gracias. Now in English, thank you.
So once again, let me say into the microphone here, Eugenio Solís has been our guest. We're so grateful to have you here. Thank you for starting off our program. So another hand, please, for Mr. Solís. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I will invite our next guests to come up and join us, and they will be Gabriela and Diego Rivera, and Santiago, please come up as well. In this next segment, we'll talk with our guests about life in Iowa for Latino residents, the very individual and personal experience of being Latino in a state with relatively little ethnic diversity. I'll start the introductions here as our guests come up. Gabriela Rivera is a program specialist at the University of Iowa Center for Diversity and Enrichment and co-director of West Liberty Enrichment Program, focusing on teaching literacy to immigrant parents and their children. And she was born in Mexico and moved from Mexico City to Davenport in 1988, receiving her MA in Student Development in Post-Secondary Education from the University of Iowa. She's worked in many different areas, including admissions counselor and paralegal, Spanish teacher, and as we said earlier, is currently a program specialist at the Center for Diversity and Enrichment. So thank you for being here with us, Gabriela.
Thank you very much. I'm very delighted.
Good. And Diego Rivera, just next to Gabriela, is co-owner of El Sol restaurant in Solon, Iowa. He was born in Monterrey, Mexico, and migrated to the U.S. in 1988. Has been in the restaurant business for 6 years and has owned 5 restaurants and currently owns 2. They're both in small rural communities in Solon and Mount Vernon, communities that you tell me have either no Latinos or have fewer than about 1%. And he currently has 14 full-time employees. Thank you, Diego, for joining us. I know it's a busy night for the restaurant business, so we appreciate your taking your time to come here. And Santiago Vaquera-Vásquez is a University of Iowa assistant professor of Spanish and Portuguese, specializing in Chicano or Chicana and Mexican literatures and cultures. He's also a writer and has published stories in international literary journals, as well as in major anthologies on contemporary literature in the Americas. So welcome to all of you. And we're going to be talking a little bit later in more detail about Midwestern Latino history and specific demographic trends and so on a kind of a macro level. But I thought we'd take these next few minutes to talk with you, sort of as we did with Eugenio there, about what the experience has been for you living in Iowa, having come from Mexico and getting, settled here in the Midwest some years ago now. So, Gabriela, let me just turn to you first and ask you something about your experience here.
Yeah, it actually be 25 years this month on October 17. So I keep that date very present in my mind. I was actually texting my mom a few minutes earlier to make sure that she was listening to the radio show, because without my parents' help, it would not be possible for us to be here either, because they're currently watching our 3 kids and having being a full-time working mom and being committed to my responsibilities outside work is very important to me, but I can only do it with the support of my family, and that's my mother and my stepfather, and who can help. And so I'm very fortunate to have that support system of having close family around this area.
Yeah. And when did your family, your relatives, first come to Iowa? Have some of them been here for much, much longer than your own family?
We're new immigrants. My first relative who settled in Iowa, in Davenport, Iowa, came in 1970, and that's my maternal aunt, Sylvia Lisman, in Davenport, Iowa. And thank you to her, everybody follow. And she opened the door to everyone to come to Iowa, and mostly Davenport and Iowa City. And from here, there's been relatives who have moved away to other states, but I'm fortunate to have settled in Iowa City.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll bring Diego in at this time too, because as I understand it, you came here actually in the same year that Gabriela did. Did you two know each other at the time, or did you meet after you'd both been in Iowa for a while?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And how
He's
did you...
younger than me. But came the same year.
Not much. Yeah, I also came in 1988. My dad migrated here in 1987. And we came in here after him.
Yeah. And how did your family decide to come to Iowa? What was it that brought you to this state as opposed to any other?
I have an uncle that lives in Davenport, and he had a roofing company, and so that's my dad's brother. So my dad came to work with him.
Yeah. Great.
Yes.
And so do you both live in Iowa City now, or are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Well, I know we're going to be talking about your restaurant business a little bit more later, and about your work here at the university later. So I'm going to move down to Santiago, and thanks for being here, Santiago. And you have lived in Iowa now for some years, but you actually lived longer in the southwestern part of the states, right?
Yes, I was born in California. My parents crossed the border a few months before I was born, so I often say that I was made in Mexico, born in the USA. And I grew up in a small rural town in Northern California. I'd say it's not that different from, say, West Liberty. And so I often tell my students that I was up until I was around 5, I was born a Mexican in the United States, and I grew up within a Mexicano community, and so Spanish was my first language. I didn't learn English until I started school, and then I became a Mexican American in that process. But so as a child, right, I grew up going to fiestas and living almost pretty much entirely in sort of a Spanish or Mexicano community.
Now, was there a similar situation for you folks, or now that you're raising your children, I guess they probably have a very wide exposure both to your Mexican heritage and then to all their American friends who don't have a Latino background. Did you, Diego, when you came here, did you find your way into a Latino community, or did you feel that you had landed right in the middle of a very, white and non-Latino Iowa?
Well, I'm going to have to say that when I came here, I don't know, I had this my mindset and that I wanted to learn English, and out of my 3 brothers, I was the first one to, I think I spent 6 months in ESL courses, and then I would move on to the regular ones, because I came here and I didn't talk to people in Spanish. I didn't watch TV in Spanish. I didn't listen to music. abandon my culture, kind of put it on hold, and I said, you know, I came to this country, I'm going to learn it, and I'm going to become part of it, and then, I don't know, I think I got more into the Mexican culture now that I'm in the restaurant business, and my wife would agree with me, because I would always listen to music in English and stuff like that, and I would only hang out with I had more Anglo friends, you know, and really not that many Spanish-speaking friends, you know, but now that I have my employees, and my wife listen to me, and I listen to banda, and I listen to this and that, and it's my wife's like, you have become so Mexican, you know, and it's like, you know, I am, you know, and like sometimes I'll take my kids to school, you know, and they'll be like, Dad, turn down your music, just turn it down, I want to, you know, to hear your music. I was like, it's not even loud, just turn it off, you know, why you drop us off, you know, so, yeah, you know, I think it was pretty easy for me. I mean, I was 11 years old.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty easy for me to adapt. You know, my older brothers had more trouble with that, but to me, it was a pretty smooth transition.
Right. And now with your kids now, do you teach them Spanish, for example? Are they bilingual?
Yes. Yeah, I totally believe that learning Spanish at a young age is very important, because I used to teach Spanish at a Montessori school to 3, 4, and 5 years old, and I'm convinced that that's the best age to teach a kid a foreign language. And so for us, it's very important. And at home, I'm fortunate that I have adults that can speak Spanish to my kids every day. Lots of my family relatives are older women who prefer Spanish. They learn English, but prefer Spanish, so it is very important. And I just feel that culture is very important part of anyone's identity, and I mean that's what I do every day in my job. I talk about students' identities, whether that's their culture, their gender, their sexual orientation. So I'm not gonna, you know, it's something I do at home, it's something I do at work, so it's just part of me. Sure. And yeah, with my kids, yeah, it is a challenge because you know, they get all kind of messages outside the house about if it's right or not, or if it's okay or cool or not. But I noticed that we actually live in Coralville, and my kids go to K-Wickham elementary school, and my 11 and my 6-year-old kids, they're in very much more diverse classrooms where their parents are from other countries, just like them. Yeah. And so they have noticed that. They have noticed that their friend, you know, parents speak Korean or Hindi or Japanese or Spanish. And so it's okay, you know, everybody else at home has a parent that probably came from another country, that, you know, they're being taught in a second or third or fourth language. Yeah. You know, so I think that my kids really embrace it. I mean, we're not fortunate to be in a dual language educational system here in Iowa City like they do in West Liberty. But, you know, that's our job then at home, to make sure that they're reading Spanish and that they watch Spanish television. And, you know, it's very different than for us, because just like Diego, I was 17 when I came here, so learning English had to happen very quickly for me, especially if I wanted to graduate from high school in 1 year. I came when I was a senior, and then going to college, and then taking ESL for 1 more year at the community college. But I love the English language, so I'm always very conscious of making sure I write and speak well, because that's very important, especially when you're in a professional job. And in Spanish too, in Mexico, we have a saying that says you're very well educated, bien educado, and it not only means that you're being well educated in a formal setting, but you have good manners. And so, you know, even if you don't have the opportunity of going through formal education in a classroom, that the fact that your parents teach you good manners, it's even more important. So I think that's very, very important to teach to our kids.
Santiago, so you grew up really very much in a Mexican community in California, and then, am I correct in thinking you lived in the Southwest?
I did. I did my graduate work in Southern California, in Santa Barbara, and then after I finished my PhD, I went to teach at Texas A&M. So I was living in Texas for a number of years. And that's when I started what I often refer to as my period of exile from California, or Mexile. And afterwards, I taught at Penn State before coming here. One of the reasons why Iowa seemed so attractive to me, at least at least professionally, was because when I was in the process of being hired, we were talking about building an MFA in creative writing in Spanish. And at the time, there was only one other program in the U.S., and that was at University of Texas El Paso. Now we are the third. The second one started at NYU, and we just started. And one of the sort of the odd things that has happened in my life, at least odd to other people, but not to me, is the fact that as a Chicano growing up in California, and as a writer, I write in Spanish, and that's something that is often found surprising by other writers, especially Latin American writers, because they wonder, because we often think that the Chicano writing is now in English, but there is a generation of Chicano authors from the 60s through the early 70s who were writing in Spanish, and it just so happened that I just started working in Spanish for. It's a very long story that I won't get into, but it's something that I've kept at, and so coming to Iowa, and with the possibility of working in an MFA in Spanish, my hope is that that we can start looking at or attracting other Latino students who grew up similar to me, right? So grew up in the U.S., grew up in bilingual households, and who want to write and think that Or who think that they can use Spanish in a creative way, and so hopefully we can start also attracting students to our MFA. Of course, we have the workshop, which is a fantastic program, and we've had a number of important Chicano and Latino authors who've come out of here, including, of course, Ana Cisneros, Oscar Cázares, una thesis in Texas, Daniel Alarcon. Right? So hopefully, as our program grows, we can start attracting and bringing back Spanish as a creative language for U.S.-born Latinos, which I think would be it's a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is an amazing thing that it was just a couple of years, last year even, when this was made a sort of a formal program.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. How many students do you know roughly are involved in the Spanish creative
We currently
writing?
have. I don't have the exact number, but I'm thinking around 8, 9, 8 or 9. Yeah. We don't have any Latinos yet, but it's hope that we'll start attracting more.
Sure. In your own work, so you write in Spanish. Do you do your own translations into English, or are they not translated?
I have. Recently, I've been invited to participate in a number of events here. Most of my events are in Spain or in Mexico, or sometimes in South America. But so when I come to the U.S., I often find myself having to self-translate. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a reading at Prairie Lights, and I read a story that I had translated of my own. But yet one of the things about self-translation is that I have a tendency. I feel like George Lucas doing Star Wars, right? I mean, I always want to sort of change things, and the translation then ends up becoming different from the original.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're raising a son as well, and I take it he's probably also bilingual.
Not yet.
Not yet.
He is my nephew. My sister, his mother passed away a couple of years ago, and she didn't. She wasn't really raising him in Spanish. And when he's come to live with me, everybody, including my mom in particular, were like, well, he has to learn Spanish. And of course, I agree. But it's always very difficult to start, when he's 9. And he's really fascinated by the language. And so he wants to, he self-identifies as Mexican, which I think is really cute, right? When he's now 10, and he'll tell me that sometimes, when he was living in Iowa, he's currently living in Albuquerque, because I don't know if I've mentioned I'm actually leaving at the end of the semester. I'm moving to the University of New Mexico. But Jasper, my nephew, one day in the car says, my friends don't understand who I am. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, well, I'm Mexican. I went, really? What does that mean? So it's been a really interesting and rewarding experience for me.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, thanks for sharing some of your personal stories here. We'll have both Gabriela and Santiago up again in a minute, so thank you very much. And right now I'd like to invite Miriam to join us. And so please thank these guests for what they've shared. Thank you. Please just stay there. Yeah, so we're inviting now Miriam Alarcon-Avila to join us. She is a chef at the New Pioneer Co-op, and she is also an artist, a visual artist, and a painter, and very innovative in her artwork, which carries over into her work with food. And so Miriam, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and buenas noches.
Yes. And
good night to everyone.
Yeah. So you and Diego are going to talk to us a little bit about food and introducing certain flavors and tastes that may be a little, what should I say, are more or truer perhaps to the original taste of food from Mexico than some of what we've come to associate with Mexican food in the U.S. that has been sort of modified so much that you were telling me before there are certain spices that everyone seems to associate with Mexican food in most restaurants here in the States, and you say, we don't use that in Mexico. Real Mexicans wouldn't make it that way. So I wanted to talk to both of you about your experience here. Diego, I'll ask you first about El Sol, the restaurant you have now in Solon. And
shouldn't ladies go first?
Well, sure, you can go first if you like. Sure. We'll turn to Miriam. Miriam, so you work at New Pioneer Co-op, and you're a chef. You also give cooking classes, and so tell us how you got started in that.
Well, it's kind of like craziness in my life because I never considered myself a good cook. My sister, she's a really good cook. I realized then later that because the way you grow in Mexico is completely different than how you grow here. We grow pretty much all around family, and we all always get together and cook food together. And you go to the market 3 times a day. You go in the morning and buy the fresh bread and bolillos, and conchas, all the sweet breads, and then get some tortillas. Everyone just get up early in the morning, sometimes like 4 a.m. in the morning or 5 a.m. in the morning. People is making line to buy fresh tortillas, and go to the market where you can see all these beautiful, colorful fruit and produce that you never see here. So when I came over here, I saw to the market, well, to the grocery store is really no market. Fresh farmers markets will be the more near to, but it's not really. You can't compare that. And then I go to the grocery store and it's like, oh my God. It's like where I can find my nopales or where the tortillas are. It's like nothing. I love cooking. One of my favorite herbs to use is epazote. And epazote is an herb, and it's pretty much grow like a wild herb, like no one's one in the gardens. But it's my favorite herb to use. And when I come over here, it's like, where is the epazote? And it's like, what is that? Oh, is it Mexican food? No, that is not a spice for Mexican food. I can find it anywhere. Fortunately, I have a friend who is from Mexico. He brings some seeds there, and he started to grow in his garden, and he passed me some plants 5 years ago. At that time, I didn't have a garden, so I'd give it to a friend. I planted in his garden, and then later that, I finally, when I have my own garden, I pass it from my epazote to my own garden. So now I have my epazote at home, so I can cook all the time with it. So I realized that the food over here is like really completely different for I grew up. And I totally remember I was 8 years old, 7 years old, and it's like you have to get up early, go to the market, buy the food, and just start to cook for for the family because everyone is working, everyone is busy. You just got to help as a part of the family. So then when I came over here, I realized I was a very good cook. And I love baking. I think I am a better baker than a cook that make food. I love baking. I just love the way how the chemistry work in the food. So I used to do all of the baking in Mexico as a voluntary job. I learned a lot. And when I came over here, I actually was just crazy because I never thought I was going to be doing food. I come in here to pursue school and education through art, which is what I really want to do. But I realized that I'm a good cook, and I find New Pioneer Cup, which I love. It was the more near to my Mexican all-natural food. So that is what I just start to work over there and start to develop all of the new recipes and just start to learning all the process. When I get hired, it's like I didn't speak any English at all. At all. It is like I can understand it because it is incredible. See how when you have the need, you are open, like all your senses are completely open. And you can read not just words. You can read the visual movement of the people, how they express themselves, how they move it. So you have a sense the word they are saying, but it's not clear. I just remember I keep saying yes, yes to everything. And I got the job, and I remember I have to start to bake. Like they told me, you got to be there. My second day of work is like, you got to be there 4 a.m. in the morning and bake scones and muffins. And I say, God, I know how to do that. I have experience. That is okay. So just get up there and start to make this. And then when I see the recipes, they're all in English. And I say, I can do this. I can do this. I did it. And I keep growing in and learning. And I really believe in the mission of New Pioneer Cup. It's one of the more important things for me because I think everyone has the need to put good food in yourself. It's like be part of this earth through food. We are all growing together, and when you end up eating all these artificial flavors, preserves and everything, it's just adding so much unnatural chemics to your body. It just don't belongs to. So I love work there, and right now I'm just developing new recipes, and it's funny because a lot of people I walk in town and it's like, oh, you make my son's birthday cake. And it's, oh, thank you, yeah. And then I make wedding cakes. Oh gosh, it's one of the more beautiful things I love to do. And then it's just like really beautiful to go a place and, oh my gosh, you make the more beautiful cake for us. Thank you so much. You make this, our dreams come true. So it's really satisfying to realize that you can touch people through your food.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And we'll have more to talk about certain special things in just a sec. So now, Diego, let me turn to you and ask you something about, starting your restaurants, and you're obviously successful at this, and but restaurants are such a tricky business. More restaurants seem to fail than almost any other kind of new business. What is the little niche you've been able to find and find success in?
Well, like, I haven't been successful in everything.
Well,
it's just in Mexico they have a saying that screwing things up, you learn screwing things up,
sure.
And like I said, I opened my first restaurant in 2006, and then I was learning and screwing things up, and then we were thinking of a way of erasing things, so we got the flood. So.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
So then after that, we opened another restaurant downtown, and it wasn't really my thing working with students because they would tear things up. So then we opened one up in Tiffin. Opened one up in that went well. Then she was my customer.
I love his
That's
food.
how I met her.
Sad is not there any longer.
So then I sold that, and I opened up a restaurant in Solon.
Yeah.
And I've been searching for these things, like, what is it that I need to do? Well, first I needed to go where there wasn't any other Mexican restaurant.
Right.
Because then they have to put up with it, no matter what. Yeah, I had people go, they take advantage because they're the only Mexican restaurant here, But I think that was one of the things, And then we opened one up in Mount Vernon. So I think one of the things that I have been told that has made it so successful is that personal touch that we haven't lost it. That people walk in, and how are you doing? And we get to know them. We get to know them at first name. We're trying to keep it small and simple, and we're always trying to learn things and trying to change things around. A lot of times people will make a menu and they'll keep it the same, for 20 years or whatever. I make my menu and it's really weird because a lot of times you think, wow, people come and they say, oh, is it authentic or is it not? When I opened my first restaurant, the guy that was my business partner, I said, whatever we do, we're not gonna make chimichangas, all right? But you know what? It's
right.
like the biggest selling thing we have. So nowadays, I think it was on Tuesday. I was just talking to the guy that's my business partner right now, and he's also the cook. And I said, you know what? I think we need to, if we're gonna sell chimichangas, we need to come up with the best chimichangas because everybody makes chimichangas. And I said, and a lot of people say, oh, you have the best. But if you really think about it, in a way, it's the same thing that other people have in certain things. We have some things that do stand out, but maybe, about 15% of our menu. But then I thought we need to get a hold of a chef or something. Gotta get your phone number. Gotta get a hold of a chef and see if we can come up with a good cheese sauce for the chimichanga.
Yeah.
And I always try to educate myself a little more about the sauces and about what's, I went to Reinhardt Foods food fair and I said, I want to go and I want you to teach me how, I know I was from Monterrey and we're known for grilling steaks, but probably not the best steaks. I said, I want to go and I want to learn. Please show me. They had chefs there that show us how to, grill the steak. Don't flip it over. Do this, do that. You get the juice out and stuff like that. And I'm always trying to learn a little more. And I think, and I always go and I ask my customers. I say, how was everything? And I always keep and I go asking and I keep asking and I think, I'd rather them tell me. And I said, please tell me, if it was bad, I want to fix it. Yeah. Because, you say that they're not going to come back. And I say, I'd rather hear it from them so I can fix it so they can come back.
Right.
So we always try to, I had a customer that would come in, and would come in like 3-4 times a week for a long time until one day I went and he came by himself. And one day I went up there and I said, hey man, I got a question for you. I said, why do you come here every day and you eat the same food?
Yeah.
He said, well, I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't like Mexican food, but I love the way you guys treat me. I don't have a family or friends, and you guys make me feel special, And I always remember that, I was like, I think that's going to be a good key. I'm going to try and stay in contact with my customers and really keep that personal touch, and get close to them, because those are the people that, even if you screw up one time, they're not going to walk away. They're going to come and tell you, hey, you know what? I didn't like your food today. It's bad, My steak was bad, and it's like, whoa, let me fix it, So I think that's what has really helped us, that personal touch and really getting close to our customer. She was my customer.
And also, I also say that he makes sure that everything is just really good. He was the owner of the restaurant in Tiffin, and my kids and we was there like almost every day. And when he left, it's like we totally noticed that something was different because we went there and the food was not tasting the same. The chicken was just like rubber, and I thought, wow, I can't believe it. Why these are serving this food? It's like it's a bad service. Then later I find Gabi and I find out that Diego sold the restaurant, and I saw, oh my God. So we don't stop there anymore, and as it is true, and as how Diego said, one of the very important things is give a really good customer service. And good customer service, you don't need to have just sometimes like a good cook, because if you start from very good ingredients, if you have a really good recipe, anyone can make a really good salsa. And if you put love to your work and to your food, people can feel that. I always have this belief that people eat the energy and the love that you put in it. It's pretty much what is feeding you, what is making you. Sometimes you just eat that kind of food that is not feeding your soul, and then you just feel like, I'm hungry. What's going on? I've just eat this big hamburger and fries, and I don't feel anything in my stomach. Yeah. So it is as he say, the quality, the service, the welcoming, the family thing that we all Mexicans growing up, like seeing aunts and mothers and grandmothers. We usually know means a few families that makes more like Mexican women cooking around. So that is the more important.
Yeah. Any last thoughts from you, Diego? Or from you, Miriam?
Well, it's just one of the things that I have also done, especially now that I'm in the smaller communities. They have a farmers market there, and if I get all, like, usually during the summer, especially in the summer, I get all my produce from the farmers market, and I pay twice as much, sometimes triple, but you know what, like, I have had so many people this summer go. There's a place called Crow's Market between Mount Vernon and so on, and I've been buying my tomatoes and my cucumbers and my green peppers and my jalapenos from them, and people are like, oh my God, these tomatoes taste so different. They could tell. Yeah. They could tell. I said, well, it's organic. I said, it's organic. I'm able to get it now, and don't get used to it. Because in the winter, of course, you could only get it from the big companies and stuff. Sure. And but I think, buying from the small towns like that and buying from the farmers market, a lot of people comes back and they've come in and they say, oh, I came here because you buy it from the farmer's market. Yeah. And I was like, well, thank you. Hopefully I can pay for that. Yeah. So,
and you were going to say something.
My last thing, I really want to say this. The first thing I noticed when I came over here is like, oh, that is a Mexican food over here. Try the rice. And I tried, and it's like, oh my God, what is this thing? And then try the chicken. And I tried. Every single thing, that's the same thing. And then why they put cumin in every single thing? It's like cumin is it's piece. Well, of course, it comes in some recipes and a few quantities, but here they put it in a Chinese rice, and it's Mexican rice. Put cumin in everything, and it's Mexican food. It's not true. So please, if you want to do a pretty good Mexican food, take your cumin out of your shells.
Okay, well, a good tip. So Miriam Alarcon-Avila, thank you so much for joining us. Diego Rivera, thank you. Real pleasure to talk to both of you tonight. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is WorldCanvass, a production of international programs at the University of Iowa, and we invite you to watch the rebroadcast of this program on UITV or listen on Iowa Public Radio or KRUI-FM. Links to the broadcast can be found at International Programs website, international.uiowa.edu. The full WorldCanvass series may be seen on UITV and will be available as a downloadable podcast on iTunes. I'd like to invite you to the next program in the WorldCanvass series, which will be held in the Senate Senate Chamber of the Old Capitol Museum on November 2nd, and the evening will be a very special one. We'll be presenting the International Impact Award to co-founder of the International Writing Program, Hualing Nye Engel, and we'll have quite an evening planned. Please join us for that. That's IWP, Writing the Stories of the World, on Friday, November 2nd, in the Senate Chamber of the Old Capitol Museum. So I'm being joined now by three really great people who have helped pull this program together as we wanted to focus on the Latino Midwest, actually in advance of a symposium that will be happening here at the University of Iowa next weekend. So sitting next to me is Claire Fox, and next to her is Omar Valerio-Jiménez, and you already know Santiago Vaquera-Vásquez, university professors, and as I mentioned, co-organizers of this upcoming symposium, also called the Latino Midwest. And by the way, the symposium is sponsored by the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies and by International Programs. It is the Fall Humanities Symposium. Claire Fox is the UI Associate Professor of English and Spanish and Portuguese. And next to her is Omar Valerio-Jiménez, UI Associate Professor of History, and his research and teaching focus is on the borderlands, Latino and immigration history. And as you know, we've already met Santiago. So I want to turn first to you, Omar, if you don't mind. I'd like to ask you to sort of give us an overview of the influence Latinos have had on the Midwest. It's a long history here in the Midwest, isn't it?
Right. One of the things that I like to, well, let me back up and say that when I first decided to come to Iowa 6 years ago, some of my friends and colleagues in California where I was living said, they asked me, you know, are there Latinos in Iowa? And I'd like to bring that up sometimes, that kind of story, because it actually illustrates 2 points, 2 misconceptions. And that's one, that that Latinos are sort of new arrivals in Iowa, and also that their numbers are scarce. Latinos aren't new arrivals. They've been arriving, they've been here in the Midwest, traveling to the Midwest since the late 19th century, to Iowa, specifically to work in agriculture and the railroads, and throughout, you know, the Midwest to Illinois and Michigan and so forth. So, you know, one of the misconceptions that I like to sort of point out in my classes is that Latinos are not new immigrants. There are new immigrants among us, but there's people who've lived in the Midwest. There's people in the Midwest, like in places like Davenport, places like Moline, Chicago, obviously in Detroit, who've been here for generations. And so their children, you know, or the people who are living here today, are, you know, second, third generation, you know, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, and so forth. And so one of the things that I also like to explain in my classes is that, you know, Latinos, we're not all the same, right? Not only are there class differences and regional differences, so, you know, we heard from people who are from Monterrey, from Chihuahua, I'm from Tamaulipas, you know, all northern states, but then there's people from Zacatecas, you know, from more central regions, and there's great diversity, not just in terms of how we speak, but also in terms of, you know, the kind of foods we eat. So the kind of foods that, you know, Santiago and I grew up with are probably different than the kind of foods that, you know, people maybe in the Midwest might grow up with, even if they're Latino. But anyway, so the other thing that I like to explain is that, you know, even though the first Latinos in the Midwest were probably Mexican, soon enough, you know, Puerto Ricans joined them, especially in the early 20th century. And today, you know, we have Puerto Ricans, you know, Dominicans, Central Americans, and so, you know, there's a variation in terms of national origins, and then there's obviously, you know, mixing. So, you know, these immigrants have mixed with other Latinos, and also with, you know, with Iowans or with Midwesterners. In general, I think that Latinos have been in the area for a very long time. And there's also been, they've come from many different parts of the world, of Latin America. And some have also come from just other parts of the U.S. One of the things that struck me about when you were talking to Eugenio and also with Diego is that, you know, their story is actually quite typical of, you know, that they arrived here following other people, you know, so it's this sort of chain migration, right? That family and friends bring other people here, and even you know, even Gabriela mentioned that as well, right? The other thing that is also very common is that, you know, when scholars speak to recent immigrants or even, you know, immigrants who've been here for a while, they ask them, why did they come to the Midwest? Why did they come to Iowa? Why did they come to rural places? And immigrants many times tell them because, especially if they're moving from places like California or big cities or even, you know, in Texas, they mention a few things. One of the things they mention is that there's a slower pace of life that they like here. There's affordability. And there are many times lower crime rates. And this goes back to, you know, this isn't new. If you speak to, you know, researchers, historians who looked at, who sort of looked into why migrants were moving here from Texas in the early 20th century, they had similar reasons in some cases, and sometimes they were escaping what they thought was sort of more blatant racism that they sort of experienced in Texas. And when they came to Iowa, they said it wasn't as harsh.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Huh. And just to stick with that question of racism, overt or otherwise, here in the Midwest, can you give us some historical perspective there? What kind of reception really did these, I don't know if there were waves of immigrants or you know, just a family coming through, perhaps a migrant worker being in an area for a period of time and then not there during the rest of the school year, or whatever. What kinds of images do Iowans who are not Latinos have of these groups of immigrants who've come over the last, I don't know, 50 years?
Well, I think that some of the first immigrants who came here, one of the things I forgot to mention in my previous comments is that the first immigrants who arrived here from places like Texas or Mexico were coming here as a reason to you know, for work, but they were actually labor recruiters who worked for, you know, who were recruiting for agricultural companies or railroads, who were actually going to, you know, Mexican border cities like Ciudad Juarez or like Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, and recruiting people and saying, we want workers to come here. Yeah. And so for the companies, obviously they wanted them to come here. They wanted this labor. I think, you know, early on in the late 19th century, early 20th century, I think many Iowans didn't you know, necessarily interact with that many Latinos because they were living, you know, close to where they worked, and they weren't that big, you know, that the numbers weren't that large, and so, you know, you know, I think, you know, the majority of Iowans, the majority of people in the Midwest probably didn't have that many interactions with them. The other thing is that many of them, especially the ones who came to work in agriculture, were seasonal workers. So they were participating in what is called circular migration. They would come here to work for a while, and then they would return either to Texas or they would go to Idaho or they would go to other places. And so many times this happened when, these workers were primarily men initially, but once they start bringing families, then they start, their families start telling them, you know, or their wives start saying, well, you know, we can't keep moving around all the time. And so that's when they start establishing roots. And so from agricultural work, they start, you know, working in, for instance, in railroads, and then they start working in industry, you know, industrial work, and then they start sort of settling down. And so you know, what historian Dionisio Valdez mentions, he says they went from being sojourners to settlers, and that happened over, you know, sometimes over, you know, 1 or 2 generations. But that's when you start seeing these established communities.
Yeah, and what percentage of people living in Iowa now are Latinos?
5%, according to the 2010 census.
Yeah, and there's been a significant rise in recent years, hasn't
there?
Sure,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, so from the 2000 to the 2010 census, the percentage of Latinos in Iowa increased by 84%. And across 12 Midwestern states, eight of those states had more than 73% growth of Latinos from the last census to the most recent one.
Right. Right, and so a large number of those people have gone through the citizenship process and have become citizens, and now obviously can be voters and so on. So there are big implications in schools, in education around the state, offering English classes to students young people who come here and aren't really well versed in English yet. And you know, we're in a political year. The whole question of voters' rights and so on. There are lots of things related to various populations that we would consider minority populations, and they're very, very critical. And one of the recent ones is voter ID business, and the implication that some make is that these kinds of measures that have either been voted in some cases and then rejected by the courts would scare off or would perhaps limit access of certain populations to the vote. Do we have concerns with that here in Iowa? Go to either one of you.
I don't know if Omar wants to take that. He's
I'll
more of our data person.
Yeah. That's why I had a cheat sheet here. Yes, and actually this is a good point to sort of to talk about the Latino Midwest Symposium that's coming up in about a week. One of the panels that we're going to have is a panel on immigration law and sort of the aftermath of Postville, for example. And two of the people who are going to be speaking one of them is the state director of LULAC, Joe Henry, and another one is an attorney with ACLU, Rita Bennett. I think I got her name right. I'm sorry. And they're going to be speaking about a lawsuit that they filed against the Secretary of State in Iowa to try to prevent what they believe is a voter suppression kind of action. Yeah. And I don't know all the details, but I know that there's faculty members here at the University of Iowa who've talked about these. Voter ID kind of laws, and how even if you're non-Latino, if your name is John Wilson on your your driver's license, but on your voter registration it's John Q. Wilson, then you're going to run into problems. Or if a common name like that, John Wilson, there might be a felon in the state that has that name, and so there's all sorts of issues. Yeah. But in particular, LULAC and ACLU are taking up this issue because LULAC in particular and ACLU believe that these kind of laws might have a greater effect on Latino populations.
Right. Well, thank you. Claire, can you tell us just a little bit more about the breadth of speakers you're going to have at the symposium?
Oh, sure. For the past 18 months, the three of us have been working together on the planning of an event that's going to take place here on campus at the University of Iowa next week. So beginning October 11th, Thursday, through Saturday the 13th, we're hosting a symposium called the Latino Midwest, which is really intended to showcase the depth and breadth of Latino cultures and presence here in the Midwest, in Iowa and in our neighboring states. We've got several very high-profile speakers coming in, some leaders in the field of Latino studies. Vicky Ruiz, for example, an historian from University of California, Irvine, who specializes in women's history and labor history, will be one of our keynotes. Jose Limon of University of Notre Dame, director of Latino studies there and a professor in English and American studies, will be another keynote speaker. And his current research is about Latinos in Chicago. We also have a prominent scholar of bilingual education and sociolinguistics, Ana Celia Centella. We have performers, Lila Downs, the Mexican singer-songwriter, Junot Diaz, the prominent author who just won the MacArthur Foundation Genius Award. These are our keynotes and our prominent speakers, but we've also organized panels on a variety of issues: arts, culture, immigration, labor history, civil rights, religion, and all of this will be showcased here for the 3-day period starting next week.
And can anyone from the public come to?
Yes, all the events are free, open to the public, with the exception of the Downs concert, which is sponsored by Hansher, and tickets for that are available online.
Well, we did hear a little bit about one of the writers who will be coming. Well, tell us something very quickly, if you can, about the Latino or Chicano voice, the literary voice of some of the best authors these days. What are some of the names we should be looking for if we want to read the best Latino authors?
Well, it's interesting that we still have to see more Latinos coming out of the Midwest. There are groups of writers that are. There's a Latino writers collective in Kansas City, for example. There are groups of writers in Chicago. One of the writers that we're inviting is a Dominican writer, Ray Andújar. He currently lives in Chicago. He's a performance artist. Also from Kansas City, from this writers collective, we have Shanath Carraza. She's a Mexicana poet. And then, of course, we have Gino Diaz, who we're all really excited about. And if you want to go, I highly recommend that you arrive early, because I'm afraid that the Angler's not big enough, not large enough to for everybody. But as I mentioned earlier, we have there have been a number of prominent writers who have come through the Writers' Workshop, including Cisneros, of course. Juan Felipe Herrera, the current Poet Laureate of California, came through the workshop. And you know, as I said, we're sure to see more. We have currently one Latino in the workshop, Jorge, who's sitting back there. But I'm sure that we're going to hopefully see more.
Yeah. Wow, well, this went by way too fast, but thank you so much, Claire Fox and Omar Valerio-Jiménez and Santiago Vaquera-Vásquez. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So I'm going to invite our next group of guests up here, and you'll recognize one of these people. Gabriela Rivera is going to join us again, along with Andrew Branan and Hector Ibarra. Please just sit wherever you like, Hector. As you know, Gabriela works here at the University of Iowa, and we've heard from her a little bit earlier. Just next to me here is Hector Ibarra, and Mr. Ibarra is the son of migrant workers. He's a retired West Branch science teacher, recently recognized by the Obama administration for his contributions to science education in the state and the country. He's a member of the National Assessment Governing Board, which is responsible for setting policy for our nation's report card. And we'll be going to Hector in just a moment. Andrew Branan is at the far end there. Hi, thank you for coming. He's currently a doctoral student in social studies education at the University of Iowa. Andrew taught high school social studies in Washington, Iowa for 7 years, and during that time he created and taught a Latin American history course and was a National Social Studies Teacher of the Year nominee during 2011 and 12. And so please welcome all of these guests. Perhaps I'll go first to you, Andrew, at the far end here. Can you tell us a little bit about this course you started in Latin American history?
Definitely. The course sort of came about really in a sort of reflection of my education here in Iowa. I came from Costa Rica at a very young age and grew up in a really small town that most people don't know of Liska, Iowa, in southwest Iowa. And opportunities to sort of study my history really didn't exist. And as a teacher, one of the things that you really try to do is you try to create connections between the courses and the students themselves. And as I taught in Washington, Iowa, we had a rising number of Latino students, primarily Mexican students, who were really missing that opportunity to connect their own sort of story to the topics that were being taught. And we had a great guidance counselor by the name of Greg Yoder, who approached me in regards to creating this course because of my background in history and American Indian Native Studies and my background as a Latino. So the course sort of revolved around the things that I was comfortable with, primarily being Indian Studies, pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. So it was really 3 to 4 sort of units in a 9-week span. We examined sort of the big 3 indigenous groups in the Americas that have contact with European powers in Central and South America, the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca. But we also looked at some of the smaller groups that are sometimes ignored, the Chavin and Paracas groups, Moche, Tlaxcalans, and groups like that. And I really wanted to provide the students with a chance to look at that history as much from an indigenous point of view as possible. So we would read things like the Popol Vuh. We read at least the first 2 chapters of the Popol Vuh to get an understanding of sort of Mayan history. We looked at sort of art history with 3 main groups, looking at the Templo Mayor, Coricancha for the Inca, the numerous sort of temples that you find in Mayan civilizations. And then we sort of progressed into contact and colonialism. We read Bernal Diaz's accounts and Columbus's letters back to Spain,
the Pizarro brothers in South America. And I was really trying to give them a chance to see, sort of how maybe events in modern day Latin America reflected events in colonial Latin America. And we would culminate with independence movements in South America and Central America. They had a chance to read some poetry, Pablo Neruda's The Dictators. They read a great book called The Underdogs by Mariano Escuela. And on Fridays, I would have them bring in current events relating to Latin America as much as possible, whether it was a newspaper article that they found in maybe Buenos Aires, or even stuff that was going on in Europe. And initially, when the class began, it was a real mix of students. I really wanted to try and get as many Mexican students as possible into the class, and we did succeed in that. We had a strong number of Mexican students. But as the class sort of progressed, it did become a mix of Anglo students, Mexican students, and the response was really sort of great to see. Initially, the students did balk a little bit at the amount of reading that they had to do. I did want to make the class sort of a college prep course, so they did have to read quite a bit. But they started to really associate with the readings and relate to the readings, and they would go home and talk to their parents or their grandparents and about some of the stories, and they could relate to that as well. I would try to put as much things as possible in English and Spanish for the students. Some of them were not strong English speakers or writers. And by the time the class sort of ended, it's no longer taught now that I don't teach there anymore. But the last year that I taught it, the last term, it was taught 2 times a day to classes of anywhere from 26 to 30 students. Wow. And I would do an end of the term assessment, and students would write comments where they would say, hey, this was a real chance for me to learn about my past. And in a lot of ways, it was a chance for me to learn about my past as well, as I went through that class. And the students would tell me things that they knew, that they had learned from their parents or from their family members, and we were able to sort of bring that into the curriculum itself. So it was a really rewarding class to be a part of.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. I'm sorry to hear that the class isn't currently being offered, but perhaps that'll change one day.
I hope so.
Yeah. Andrew Branan, thank you. I think I'll go next to Hector Ibarra, and I'd like to hear a little bit about your teaching experience and your life as an educator.
Thank you for the opportunity to present and to give you experiences, to give you a viewpoint from myself as a student, from myself as a teacher of 37 years experience, and also from the point of view from the National Assessment Governing Board that I serve on. I will have to refer to some of my notes because I have percentages or numbers, and I want to make sure that I have these right or correct, but I won't bore you with stuff that is way too much. If any of you want to look at the information that's on the internet, you can access it by nces.ed.gov/nations report card /states. And it's really no secret that American students are doing poorly on national and international tests. There are many people that don't believe this is true. There are teachers and administrators who do not believe this is true. But there are also many people that do believe there is a crisis at hand. In 1983, the report, A Nation at Risk, came out, and really things haven't changed since that time. In Iowa, roughly 81.5% of the students are white, 8.5% are Hispanic, and 4.3% are students that take English proficiency classes. We all know that the gap exists between Hispanics and whites, and it is a significant gap. When you look at the NAEP test results that are out there, they test on a cycle between math, reading, science, and writing. And on all those tests, Hispanic students do significantly not as good as white students. And so the key is to try to figure out how can we improve the teaching that exists. Some examples on this: on the 2011 Iowa test, there was an 18-point difference between Hispanics and whites. But in 2009, the difference was 27 points. So there's a 9% growth that has occurred in those 2 years. In math, Hispanics scored 19% difference between whites and Hispanics. The national average was 23 points. And I didn't record down what the Iowa average was 4 or 5 years back. The same way with the national 2011 writing report. In that, they only have the information for 12th grade, and this information is only at a national level. And the national level for 12th grade was 25 points and 22-point difference for the 8th grade level. And this is between Hispanics again and the whites. Another thing that is very concerning is the dropout rate. In Iowa City, it was reported in 2011 in a report to the Iowa City Board that 15% of the students that dropped out were Hispanic. Statewide, the percentage was 24.8%, but in 2009, the percent was 31.2%. So there has been a growth in those areas. Now, one knows that the graduation rate is one of the big indicators of how successful schools are and how students are also. But improvement has also been seen in the college graduation rates of Hispanics in Iowa. 52% of Hispanics graduate from Iowa, where 66% of whites graduate in the state of Iowa. So that what it tells you is that if we get Hispanics in, they're being successful, and that's a really important aspect. 50 years ago, I experienced many of the same challenges that Hispanics experience right now. The scenario was different. The challenges were basically the same. Language barrier, low income, living in communities where your models were other Hispanics, speaking only Spanish, never really English unless I went to class, or when I went to class. My parents moved to Clear Lake, Iowa when I was 5.5 years old. And they moved from Mexico to Texas, and then they moved to Iowa, to Clear Lake. And my parents were migrant workers for about 1.5 years. They decided to settle in Clear Lake. Thank goodness because of my mother, who was very determined that we were going to be settled and not moving from field to field. I myself, as a child, worked in the field, so I know what that is like and the experience that it brought. In my case, my salvation was my 4th grade teacher. I hadn't really learned very much English the first 4 grades, but there was this teacher, Myrtle Olson, who was very interested in my well-being, recognized something, whatever it might have been, and took the time to spend time with me after school. And because of that, I learned to value the need to get a good education. I was blessed to have many, many teachers that looked out for me. They cared about me, and I could see that. I could sense that. And when you have a caring teacher, one of the things that you have is that you want to work harder. You don't want to fail. You want to excel at what you do. And so in my case, that was one of the things that was really, really good. Now, school for me, I will say, was a struggle. In 7th grade and below, my percentages on the ITBS tests were 35% and below. By 8th grade, I finally cracked the 50% rate, and those 50% rates were basically in science and mathematics, which were above 65%. But my reading scores and my vocabulary scores were consistently below 40% and below 20% all the way through high school. Now, one might say, well, how did you make it through if your reading and your writing skills were so poor? Well, the one thing I could always do was I excelled in my study habits. I could outwork most students in memorizing what I had to do, and I had this expectation. I did not want to live the life that my parents were in a way forced to live because of moving from Mexico and being middle class and moving to the United States and into a life of low income, maybe not poverty, but in today's means, it was poverty. So the thing is, my message in terms of when I look at what's going on in schools, Hispanics, as any student, can do well. But the biggest thing is that they need to have this desire to excel. They need to believe in themselves. And there are just so many obstacles out there that just bring them in and bring them downward if they get into this cycle that they can't get, that their hole is so deep that they cannot get out of.
Yeah. Thank you. Hector Ibarra. And
You're welcome.
yeah, so let's turn back to you, Gabriela. And you work with students who are interested in coming to college and also with students in the West Liberty school system. So tell us a little bit about your work there.
Yeah, that is correct. And I feel so grateful to be sitting right next to two teachers, because I think that teachers are so important to Latino male teachers. And I think that exactly that role models are needed in this state. There's so many connections I'm making right now going through my brain as far as, you know, the path to college from K to 12, and then once they get here. And I do travel a little bit to West Liberty, and I used to more when I was an admissions counselor, not so much more now. Because my role now in my office, we're a retention office. So just like Mr. Ibarra say, or my biggest job now is to make sure a student, once he or she arrives here, is that he or she graduates from the university. Mm-hmm. And everything that happens with the environment. Mm-hmm. And working with all the professors and the university setting is very important as well. You know, what Professor Santiago Vaquera was saying, we having a lot of bilingual, bicultural students coming to this university, new immigrants, first generation Latino students who are so eager to share their own experience. A class on ethnic studies in high school is such a great idea. Yeah. The fact that we can do it in Iowa, mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. In other states you can't. Uh-huh. I wish there were more classes that are being taught, like the one that teacher Andrew did. Mm-hmm. Andrew, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because once the students get here, they want to share so much about their own experiences. And in classes like Chicano studies classes, and I know Professor Rivas will be up here in a minute too, but I'm always telling the students, learn more about your own identity, because that's really what makes them graduate. The expectations of knowing that their parents work really hard, and they, you know, we all want to be better than our parents, but of course we have such a strong family values and high expectations, nice environment, knowing that there's a supportive system here at the university of faculty and staff, administrators that care about a student's experience is very important. So a caring person is probably the most important part. The fact that students do speak Spanish at home, I see a lot of ACT scores that are troublesome with you know, the ACT being such a big factor in the admissions process into a university. But if a student can overcome all those things and really work on their English, writing, and speaking skills, I know they can do so much. And I'm so excited to hear Professor Ana Celia Centella talking about bilingualism and you know, what does that mean for someone coming to a university that has so much to offer but can't exactly put it on a piece of paper, you know, or, you know, sometimes the students don't come with a high level of academic English that is expected, but they can so write beautifully and speak so beautifully in both languages. Right. You know, but how can you translate all that into grades and to numbers like the ones that we just heard? That's the problem. That it also needs to be, you know, put in perspective. You know, we need to be valued as a culture, as people that can do so much, not just on numbers, but we have a lot to offer. And that's what I tell a lot of the students that come through my office, you know. The fact that your ACT score is not this, that doesn't mean that you cannot do the work. You know, yes, you can do it. Take a class with Professor Valerio-Jiménez, a class, because they often feel so comfortable, feel so nurtured being in these classes. They can be like, they can share so much about who they are, and once they can overcome that, then they can do anything. So again, my office does mostly do retention work. I do co-direct the West Liberty Enrichment Program with Professor Caroline Colvin, and we mentor students here at the University of Iowa, formerly from West Liberty, who are entering the university through graduation. And we have about 40 students right now in our group, and we meet with them monthly. But it's also a strong partnership with the school district. So we have anywhere from the superintendent, Steve Hansen, to the high school counselor, to the principal, to a really nice group of teachers who really believe that these students are going to succeed. And so we've seen the number of students from West Liberty enrolling at the University of Iowa increase, and actually the students who graduate. Because it's such a close community, 15 miles away from Iowa City. But yeah, our commitment is to make sure that they succeed once they're here. It's easy for a student to get in, but to graduate and make sure, you know, and also working with the parents to make sure the parents understand what that experience is like. Some parents don't have a college education. Most of these kids are first generation. So working with the parents very closely to help them understand what the experience is like. So we have taken parents to a campus visit here and you know, just talked with them about what it means, and having them sit in a classroom, taking them to the library, having a professor talk with them, feel them good about this is a good place for their son or daughter to be.
And also helping them figure out how to get past some of the financial hurdles, which affect all students these days, but I'm sure a concern also for these parents who may have first-generation college applicants.
Yeah, we do see a lot of our Latino students who have great scholarships. They come very well prepared, but yeah, financially they may not be able to afford their college education, so they're working as well. A lot of students do work, and we just have to make sure they can balance the working schedule with the academic schedule. Yeah, and mental health too. Yeah.
Any final thoughts from you, Andrew or Hector?
I think, you know, what you said about making a classroom comfortable is really, really key. A lot of my students said, you know, this is the only class that I wanted to come to today. And getting them into the classroom and making them feel comfortable is a huge step towards getting the education that they need and giving them that ability to make the next step.
Yeah, thank you.
I would say the challenge is to convince Hispanic students that it's imperative that they take hold of their own learning. It's really important. It doesn't matter who the teachers are, how good or how bad the school is. If they don't take hold of what's going on, if they don't engage themselves in wanting to make a difference in their lives, then they're going to be in the same life cycle that their parents are in.
Yeah. Wow, thank you so very much, Gabriela Rivera, Hector Ibarra, and Andrew Branan. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so now I'd like to invite our last group of guests up, José Orduña, Nina Ortiz, and Tlaloc Rivas. In this last segment, we're going to take a look at emerging research in Latino studies and on the Latino Midwest that's coming from the UI. At the far end is José Orduña, a graduate student in the nonfiction writing program at the University of Iowa. Nice to have you here, José. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're currently working on a long-form project that focuses on immigration policy, his personal naturalization experience, which took place at the Herbert Hoover Museum and Library in West Branch this summer, and some fieldwork done in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. So we'll look forward to hearing more about that. And next to him is Nina Ortiz, a doctoral candidate in anthropology doing fieldwork in Columbus Junction here in Iowa. Nina was born and raised in rural Iowa, the daughter of public school teachers. Her paternal grandparents were migrant workers from Mexico. Both sets of grandparents worked blue-collar jobs in rural Iowa. Nina speaks Spanish but did not grow up bilingual. Her undergraduate degree is in International Studies in Spanish from Central College, and she has a master's degree in Spanish as well as anthropology from the UI. So thank you for being with us, Nina. And next to me is excuse me, I knew I would mess that up, Tlaloc Rivas. And you'll have to say your name beautifully for me when you start talking. But he's a new faculty member in theater arts here at the University of Iowa. First Chicano and the fourth Latino ever to teach stage directing at a U.S. university undergrad and graduate program. You have directed plays all over the country. You have a commitment to playwrights and new play development, and I want to hear more about your work generally in theater and then also here at the university. So thanks for being with us. Yeah. So José, let me turn first to you and ask you to tell us a little bit about the research you're doing and also about your personal experience in naturalization.
Yes, so I'm working on my MFA thesis, and it follows sort of a short span of time in which I was naturalized here in Iowa at the, like you said, the Herbert Hoover Library. That was a really interesting experience. And it also follows the sort of aftermath of becoming a citizen, in which I went to the Sonoran Desert to volunteer with several groups, do some field work and research about the border as a threshold. I'm really interested in examining the way in which the border acts as a threshold that inscribes people. I see it as a certain extension of the border beyond the physical space. And I've felt that throughout my life. I've seen it in those I love and care about. My parents are right there.
Oh, hello. Welcome.
Hi, Mom and Dad. Yeah, I'm really interested in learning more about that and also rendering a prolonged work that sort of addresses the ways in which those administrative means intervene in people's lives in what I perceive to be violent, aggressive ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned in an email you sent to me that there's a certain survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, there was a certain feeling when I started my project. I thought it was just going to follow the sort of steps, and it was going to culminate with my ceremony in which I'm naturalized. But then I felt tethered in a way to going to the actual Sonoran Desert, which is through various policies has been made a bottleneck for migration recently. So I just felt really compelled to go there, and at first I didn't really know why, but I started to sort of examine that, and it sort of feels like a survivor's guilt in a way. I didn't have to go through that desert, but there's something about it that involves me, and it was also just it was really also just the result of being an American citizen. It was a removal of a certain fear that I had. If I was caught committing any sort of felony, certain misdemeanors, different crimes of moral turpitude, I could have been deported. So the removal of that fear was something that was very freeing in a way, that I felt like I could go down to the desert and do my research unencumbered, bump up against Border Patrol and not really have to fear that as much.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you. So that's José Orduña. And Nina, let me go to you now and ask you a little bit about the work you're doing. You had mentioned you might like to talk about the diversity of Latino experiences here in the Midwest.
Yeah, Omar already kind of mentioned that there is this great diversity of experience of being Latino in Iowa. And I have to say, part of what interested me about working in Columbus Junction was that I knew that my experience of being Latino was very different from the experience of being Latino that most people living there, most Latinos living there had, because I didn't grow up speaking Spanish and they did. I didn't grow up having to worry about my legal status. They did. And so I was really interested to see how they experienced Iowa and not just how Iowa experienced them. And I came to discover that celebrating events like quinceañeras, celebrating different kinds of familial celebrations, that Iowans are becoming more Latino as some Latinos are becoming more Iowan. So my experience of being an Iowa Latino was that in my high school we had 100% Latino graduation rate because it was me and my sister. And some of the students who go to school today in West Liberty or in Columbus Junction, they don't experience things quite the same way that I did. So I was looking at it from both an inside and an outside perspective, and that's really sort of brought a lot to the project and personally to my life to learn about these different kind of experiences of being Latino.
Well, that leads us, I think, pretty naturally into a conversation with you, Tlaloc. You've just begun to work here at the University of Iowa, and we thought we might talk a little bit about what it's like to be an academic, a Latino academic, and working here in theater.
What's it like to be a Latino academic? That's really interesting. Well, this is my 8th week in Iowa, so it's really exciting to be a citizen of Iowa so I can vote in this state. You know, my particular background and experience and research interests involve 3 very specific things. One is the development and the promotion of new Latino writing for the stage and for the theater. You know, there is an amazing amount of incredible work that's being done on our stages across the country. Christopher Diaz was a Pulitzer finalist for The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity. Chiara Alegria Udes just won the Pulitzer Prize for her play, Water by the Spoonful. Octavio Solís writes from his experience in the Southwest. Tanya Saracho writes from her Mexican experience and also from her immigration experience in Chicago. So many of these writers are good friends of mine from my time in New York and also in California. Excuse me. It's my sort of my charge as a director and a person who works in development of new plays to work with these writers and to promote their work as much as I can, not only nationally on our stages, but also in the classroom, which is why I'm here in a lot of ways. It's to, I saw that the opportunity to teach at the University of Iowa was really exciting, and that there was a growing sense of a different type of cultural voice to be introduced to the theater department. And this is why I'm here. Much of that is also related to the fact that I grew up in a life of political activism. I am a proud Chicano. I grew up within the Chicano movement through my father and through many of the artists that he was friends with in Southern California. I started a theater company based on a political action in California, Proposition 187. And my protest for that was to stage a theater festival of new work. And that has continued on throughout my life. That has also intersected with my interest in creating theater by and for community, whether that be a multicultural community, whether it's an African American, Latino American, Asian American. Most recently, I developed a play that was an adaptation of The Tempest, and we set it in the predominantly Latino neighborhood in St. Louis called Cherokee Street. I lived in St. Louis for 2 years before coming here, and that was my very first experience living in the Midwest. And what was interesting is that before I arrived, I wasn't sure if I would find any Latino community in St. Louis. But remarkably, I started asking around, and they kept telling me to go to Cherokee Street. And what was remarkable is that in my conversations with the residents there, many people had arrived there by accident. They had arrived to St. Louis from various parts of the Midwest because that was where the immigration court was. And they were waiting for their case or their trial to come up. And so because of the backlog, so many of them were waiting for months, and they just decided, well, I'm just going to stay here and work. And eventually they started to save their money, started their own businesses, started families, their children started to go to school. And you have this really remarkable sort of incredibly small but very tight-knit community in St. Louis, but that also sort of reflective of many other communities in the Midwest. So it's been a really exciting culture change shift for me. at the same time, I'm getting to know people here, and I'm meeting people for the first time here, which is really exciting. But I look forward to continue that kind of work here, and to also start to what I call to update the Latino narrative in the United States, which is in reclaiming that not only through literature but through arts and through music and through dance. I'm starting a website. The editor of the website is called Café Onda, which is part of a national organization called the Latino Theater Commons, which gathers together many of our prolific theater artists from across the country to really start to take control of the narrative, to tell our stories in our own way, and to really empower many other of our next generation coming up to tell their stories as well.
Yeah, great. Well, so we're looking forward to good things here with you at the University of Iowa. What are the courses you're teaching this fall?
Well, right now I'm teaching the directing courses in both the undergraduate and graduate levels.
Yeah.
At some point, I'll be, developing courses in multicultural theater, in civic engagement for our students, and also devised work. So it will be an opportunity for students to create their own work based on anything, whether it's through their own stories, whether it's through maybe something that he wrote, or it can come from anywhere. So it empowers students to become their own storytellers in a way, and to give them the tools to do that.
Well, Nina, as an anthropologist, I guess you're listening to people's stories too, aren't you?
I am, and I've heard quite a lot of them. And you mentioned, that one of the goals is to empower people, and one of the things that I've done as part of my research is teach adult English and bilingual GED classes to people in Columbus Junction. And so I've gotten to hear a lot of different stories through that experience. But I think part of the empowering people and part of moving those projects forward of higher graduation rates and more involved communities and more integrated communities is also sort of being able, Latinos, people themselves, ourselves, being able to counter this narrative that being Latino or speaking Spanish is some kind of deficit. I've had people tell me things like, oh, this kid or this person, they don't have language. They came here and they didn't have language. They did have language, it just wasn't the one that you speak. And so sort of countering those narratives and making it clear that we know that native language literacy in whatever language it is helps improve literacy in English or in whatever language that you're trying to learn. And instead of just saying, yes, it's great, you already speak Spanish, don't worry about that, now focus on English, sort of bringing that previous knowledge along as equally important and as contributing to further education is an empowering stance that we can use not only in lower levels of education, but all the way through adulthood when students come to my class, my class, and are, in my adult English class, I have a range, again, to the variety of Latinos. I had last year in a group of about 12 to 15 adult English learners, I had everybody from a guy who was learning the alphabet to a woman who had a degree in industrial engineering in Mexico, and they were all in my English class together. So we had a sort of rural one-room schoolhouse, bilingual, transnational kind of class.
Terrific, yeah. Well, so Jose, we'll wrap up with you. The writing that you're doing in your nonfiction career, where do you expect that to head? Is it going to be about sort of personal reflections on the things you see, or what kind of writing do you think you are aiming for?
I think that a lot of people do a sort of personal story really, really well, and they can probably do it a lot better than I can. My sort of writing is, I guess, kind of an autoethnographic literary essay, if that's a thing. I don't know. But I'm not a very sentimental person. I'm sort of more scornful and full of contempt. And I think that translates into an autoethnographic literary essay. I guess that's my voice.
Well, great. It's so wonderful to have you all here, Tlaloc Rivas and
Tlaloc
Nino Ortiz.
Rivas.
Say it again.
Tlaloc
Rivas. Thank you, sir. And Nino Ortiz and José Orduña. Thanks to these guests, and I want to say thank you to all of you for coming to our program tonight or for watching it, listening to it. This is WorldCanvass, presented by International Programs at the University of Iowa. I'm Joan Kerr. I'm really happy to have so many of you here, and all the wonderful people who've joined us tonight. I've learned a lot. I want to say thank you to our production partners, UI TV, UI Pentecrest Museums, KRUI, and Information Technology Services. This program will be broadcast on cable services around the state and on Iowa Public Radio and KRUI FM. And free listening anywhere you are can be found on the Public Radio Exchange or on our iTunes podcast. Reminder, our next program is November 2nd at 5 o'clock in the Senate Chamber of the Old Capitol Museum. And the program is IWP, Writing the Stories of the World. Thanks to my colleagues in international programs, Caitlin McBride, Amy Green, Connie Shea, Shayna Oley, and Christopher Clough, and to the UI TV technical team, which makes our broadcast possible. So that's it for this edition of WorldCanvass. Thanks to all of you, and we'll see you next time. Good night. Thank you. So nice to meet you.